Good morning, everyone, and good morning especially to Professor Edgar Chambers IV and Professor Agnieszka Kita, who are my guests today on another edition of Mamy, zielone, pojęcie podcast, which is brought to you by Wrocław University of Environmental and Life Sciences. And today, these two persons are my guests because we have a special occasion that kind of lends itself to it. There is a meeting of people involved in the Seasoned project. So I will talk about that in a minute, but let me first introduce our guests. So Professor Edgar Chambers IV is a very significant figure in the field of sensory food analysis and consumer research. He's an alumnus of Kansas State University and also a director of Sensory Analysis Center at Kansas State University, which is recognized as the leading institution in the world for sensory research influence. At Kansas State University, he teaches postgraduate students in sensory analysis and consumer behavior and leads research projects for national and international companies. In addition to his academic work, he also contributes to the practical application of sensory science in the food industry. In one of his articles published in the British Food Journal, he illustrates how sensory science can serve as a valuable tool in creating products with a greater chance of long-term market success by reducing uncertainty during the development process. His expertise covers products such as meat, grains, packaging, personal care, textiles, paper, pharmaceuticals, and paint finishes, amongst many other consumer and industrial goods. As I said, he's our guest today because he's working in his capacity as an advisory board member for the Seasoned project. And this project is currently implemented by a consortium of international partners and led by Professor Agnieszka Kita and her team. And the project is funded by the Horizon Europe program. So, Professor Agnieszka, now let me introduce you. You are the lead scientist on the Seasoned project. And let me just quote from the project summary. The project aims to improve the research excellence of the staff who works for UPWR's Faculty of Biotechnology and Food Science. And what the aim is that they will be able to fully conduct a sensory evaluation of food and consumer behavior. I hope that's correct. And at Wrocław University of Environmental and Life Sciences, Professor Agnieszka Kita is a faculty member of the Department of Food Storage and Technology, the head of the Discipline Council for Food and Nutrition Technology, and the leader of the Food and Health Research Group. And in addition to your academic work, Professor Kita, you also have a very strong cooperation with industrial partners, mainly probably food industry. So welcome you both to the show. And today, I guess I've mentioned that a few times already, we are going to discuss sensory food analysis, because maybe this is not something a lot of people are familiar with, other than people who specialize in it. Yes. So we will try and make the concept a little bit more familiar for everyone. So you can take turns, okay, or maybe sometimes I will address you individually. But this is a very open question to the both of you. What is food sensory analysis exactly? Why do scientists do it? And what role does it play in the creation of new food products?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's going to be a fun session, I hope. So when you think about food, why do you eat it? Why do you eat food? As people think about why they eat food, they eat it because of cost, they eat it because of nutrition, they eat it because it's convenient, but most of all, they eat it because they like it. They like the sensory properties. So they like the flavor, they like the texture, they like the way it looks. That's why we study the sensory properties. because you don't buy it if you don't like it.
That's absolutely true, actually.
So if we don't understand what those sensory properties are and why people like or don't like those properties, we can't improve products. We can't create new products. We have to understand what the needs are for new sensory experiences so that we can create new products that meet those needs. As you see, the world has become much more global. We have, 50, 60, 70 years ago, you might have eaten a diet that was traditionally Polish or Eastern European. Now, I don't think pizza is Eastern European. I don't think that sushi is Eastern European. We're eating a whole variety of things that we didn't have access to before. And sometimes those things are quite good and sometimes they're not so good. And they have to be adapted to what we want to eat wherever we are.
That's actually true. I think, especially when you mentioned sushi, I think probably the kind of sushi that we eat in Poland is very much different to the kind of sushi you eat in the US.
Yes.
So I don't know. I think you're right. So I guess people like you help the sushi chefs understand what the consumer preferences are. And, so in the end, they would accept
exactly
what's offered to them.
It's all a matter of understanding the consumer and what they want. What is it that they want? And that's true. You read off a whole list of kinds of products that I work on that aren't even food. And that's true for every product, though. When you go in to buy clothing, you look at what's available and you touch it and you feel it and then you sort of rub it against you rub your skin against it to see how it feels and how it drapes on your body. You try it on. It's the same with food. We look at it, we say, oh, that looks good, or oh, I don't think that looks so good. We smell it. Oh, that's something I think I want. As you walk past the bakery, you think, oh, I now want some bread, or I want cookies, or So you see these things and you go, oh, that sounds good. I think I'll have that. Or you smell it. I think I'll have that. If you don't like it, if it doesn't smell nice, you won't eat it. It's very you really have to modify for the population that you're working with and understand what they want.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And Professor, would you like to maybe add something from your uniquely Polish perspective?
Yeah, generally there are really different preferences. I remember one time we were checking the spices for the snacks and the company sent us a really big portfolio of different. And then we checked, okay, only three of them were accepted by people from Poland. And on the other hand, they use quite different for the people in UK. So really we have to know what people look like and what are their main choices. So
right, okay, but maybe a stupid question, because
there are no stupid questions.
Yeah, that's true. I haven't got a lot of experience with sensory food analysis, but does it or is it carried out only for new products, or can it be carried out for just about anything?
It's carried out throughout the process. So when we're first thinking about products, when we're developing the products, when you're first thinking about the products, what do people want? When you're developing the product, are we including the attributes they want? As you begin to think about marketing the product, and as you produce the product, so you've developed it, now you have to produce it, and it's got to be the same on the production equipment. What are we getting the same product? As you put that product into the marketplace, are we always producing the same quality?
Right. So you're talking about reliability, maybe?
Always. Always. It's a matter of, from the very beginning of even thinking about the product all the way through, the product has been on the market 50 years. Are we still producing what consumers want? Are we still producing the same product that we want to make?
So it's all about sort of making sure that the quality is there. And
yes.
Just to keep in the quality on the same level, because we have the definition of the product, and the product should be all the time the same. Also during the storage, depending how it's, what are the conditions of storage also, because the producer has to declare, okay, the shelf life will be 5 days, but maybe it will be 5 months or maybe 2 years even for some products. So for all the time, the quality of product should be how it's declared by the producer. So we also have to check it during the sensory analysis, using the sensory analysis.
Right. That's very interesting, because I wanted to actually ask you both, how is this analysis actually carried out? Can you give me some examples maybe of methods used in the sensory analysis, or the kind of people that are involved in this process?
Well, really, there are two kinds of people, and there are two kinds of analysis we can think of. One is the very analytical analysis. So we are trying to determine what the sensory properties are. So being very specific, if you're drinking a juice product, let's say you have apple juice. Obviously, we hope it tastes like apples. So we first want to make sure it tastes like apples. But how sweet is it? How sour is it? Do the apples taste very fresh, or do they taste cooked? What type of apple? Is it a sour apple or a sweet apple? Can you actually kind of get a sense of the variety of the apple in there? So what are the flavors that may be in that apple juice? So we want to know very specifically what the flavors are. We can measure the flavor compounds with a chemical instrument, but that doesn't actually tell us what the flavor is. That tells us, well, this compound is there or that compound is there. But it takes many compounds to make a flavor.
Right.
So the only way to know if this is like a green apple or a sour apple or a sweet apple or a cooked apple is to actually taste it. And so we have people who are very highly trained. We spend a lot of time training them to be able to produce an evaluation that's very specific. So we can talk about some examples of that and put it in context. The other side of that is we also want to know what people really like. So we may know that this is a sour apple or a sweet apple or a cooked apple juice flavor. But which one of those do people want and which one do they like? So we have to go to untrained people, consumers, everyday people who want or think they might want to drink apple juice, and ask them how they like this product. And if they don't like it, what is it about the product they don't like? If they do like it, what is it about the product they do like, so we can make sure that we always have those characteristics there, that they're always present. So two kinds of people do this: trained in a laboratory. Consumers either come to a laboratory or they test in their home or in a restaurant or wherever the case may be.
So would you say that a wine tasting could be likened to the sensory panel, let's say, or sensory experiment?
It's similar, not the same, but similar. We wine tasting that people do, there are two. Wine tasting is done by consumers who are looking at wines themselves. They're sort of oriented to wine. They like wine. They think about wine. They know the kinds of words that are used with wine. Okay, those are typical of magazine articles or things like that. In the laboratory, the winemaker, the vineyard, actually has a panel of very highly trained people. They use a slightly different vocabulary, because the vocabulary that's used for wine, for example, is it smooth, doesn't really have a meaning. It's a combination of many attributes, whether the smoothness of this wine or the boost, the sort of bloom of this wine. There are many different attributes that could cause that or result in that. So in the laboratory, we have to look at very specific attributes. So the smoothness might be a lack of astringency or a lack of sourness or a lack of woody character or many things. To the wine aficionado, the wine taster, it's smooth, and that's,
exactly.
But we have to know exactly what's causing that. So we have, again, two sorts of terminology. Similar, it works similarly, but the laboratory is much more specific and highly trained and detailed than the wine tasting might be.
And those people who work on this laboratory side, those very highly trained people, are they necessary food scientists, or can they have all kinds of background?
No, it depends on the individual conditions of this person. So usually there are people who are interested in sensory science because they have to spend some time for training, just arrive to session. But sometimes they can be just connected with some other jobs because first of all, they have to say, okay, I'm interested. So then they are checked, if I'm able to recognize the smell, the taste on the level which is satisfactory for doing sensory science. And then they are trained. And quite often they are divided. These people, they are focusing or just examining, just checking the quality of some group of product. The other ones, no, because they are accept, for instance, some of my colleague, he didn't accept fishes. So he's not able just to be invited. Yeah,
right.
Of course, because for him it's not a group of products. So also they are divided. But sometimes these people, even they are living somewhere else, so they are invited for the session. So usually for the group, for the panel, we need just for one session, just about 6-8 persons. Usually the team is three times higher because depending on the topic, on the group of products. So we invite different people.
Right. And then how long do these people spend with you? Is it a few days, a month? How long does it normally take?
It depends. And it depends in part on how specific we want to be. The more training they get, the more specific they can be. So they can be, if you're really interested in the very fine aspects of the very detailed aspects of something, we often spend 6 months training these people, 2 hours a day. So it's quite a long thing. Mm-hmm. But for some things, the attributes are much easier. It's much easier to determine if you're really focusing on only one attribute. For example, if you're focusing on rancidity of a product, does it still smell fresh or is it rancid? Mm-hmm. Rancidity is pretty easy to measure. If that's what we're focused on, we might only take 2 or 3 or 4 hours to train those people to recognize that and be able to reproducibly measure that smell or flavor. Mm-hmm. So it just depends on what the product category is and how much detail you want.
But that longest period you mentioned, 6 months, it seems to me that it requires a lot of dedication from those panelists. So do they normally juggle the, let's say, normal jobs and then come to you for a few hours whenever they're needed? Is that how it works?
It can, yes. So in the case of many panels, I think the kinds of panels that Agnieszka is working with, they're using employees or staff members who have time, who can take some time to learn the products. They're not spending 6 months, 2 hours every day to do that. My panel back in Kansas is a panel of, we actually hire the people to do this job specifically. They work for us 2 to 3 hours a day. They're part-time people. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes they're women who are stay-at-home women. They're not working outside the home. Maybe not. They may have another job somewhere. And they're working part-time for us. And so we have panelists. For example, we had, I think the longest running panelist we had worked for us for more than 25 years. Wow, so we trained them for 6 months. And then they continue to work for us. We have many panelists who have worked for us for longer than 10 years. So this is a part-time job for them. But many places it's not that. It's more using the employees who are available and can take off from their job for a period of time to learn the training enough to be able to give the response that's needed. So.
Right. And do you look for specific qualities in those people? For example, I don't know, should they have very good communication skills, or what kind of skills should that person have so that they're, a good addition to the panel?
Just maybe communication is not so important, but much more how the senses are working in this body. If they are able to recognize the smell, the taste, and not only to recognize, but to say, okay, it's stronger, it's more sweet, less sweet, just to differentiate between samples. So they are tested first, because some people, even if they are interested, but after this small exam, they obtain answer, no, sorry, you're not able just to work as a panelist.
I'm not surprised. I mean, I think I'm really rubbish. And every time I go to a wine tasting, those people always tell me, you have to look for a vanilla, the vanilla flavor. Oh, don't you think there are strawberries in the end? And I'm thinking, no, all I can taste is just wine in general.
So in our case, we have, when we are looking for new panelists, and we do that about every 3 years, we are always trying to replenish our panel. We've lost people because they've moved or they don't want to do it anymore or whatever the reason may be. And so we are always adding new panelists. And when we review those people, the first thing, of course, is availability. Are you available to be here and come and do what we need you to do? And that's easy for us because we know these are part-time job. They're treating it like a job. In the case of using employees, it's a little trickier because they have their own jobs to do and they have to have some time off. There has to be some availability of time. Then we look at, obviously, can they or can't they taste? Can they smell? Can they differentiate among things? So, for example, we do a lot of visual testing of products. We don't accept anyone who is colorblind.
Right.
Okay. And exactly the same thing happens with taste and smell. There are taste blindnesses and there are smell blindnesses. We know that happens, and everybody has a little bit of that. We're more interested in, can you get the main characteristics? We can train you to do the detail. Nobody can do the detail up front. So when you talk about strawberry or cherry or the berries at the end or whatever in wine, that took them some time to learn that. So you're not rubbish. You just don't have the training yet.
Probably, yes. Thank you. That's very reassuring.
Some people just are not good at that, though. They're not good at describing things. They're not good at really understanding that. They've never been in a kitchen before. They've never thought about spices in food. So we always look for people who have some experience with food or have some experience with they either enjoy eating, they think about, oh, I like this one better than that one. Why do I like that? They cook, whatever, many, many different options. Last thing we do is we look at can they communicate with each other? Because it's very important that we have what we call unconditional positive regard. So you have to, whatever you say, I can't go, that's wrong. As a panelist, I can't tell you that's wrong. You're right for you. Maybe it's a little different for me, but you're right for you. So if we don't agree on something, let's figure out why we don't agree, and we have to work together. We have to be able to communicate. So communication is very important. I'll give you an example. We were looking at products, soy sauce, as a matter of fact, from two different panels. We wanted to make sure that the two panels we had were absolutely the same. One of them was in Kansas. The other one was in Thailand.
I was going to ask you about some international aspects. That's very interesting. Okay.
So we have a panel in Kansas who's evaluating soy sauce, and we eat some soy sauce in the U.S., but not nearly the range of soy sauce that Asian countries do. And we have a panel in Thailand that speaks Thai. They don't speak English, and they eat a lot of different kinds of soy sauce, so they have much more experience with soy sauce. But we still want them to be the same because we want them to be very analytical and tell us exactly the same information. So we did the testing with both groups to develop a vocabulary, to develop what kinds of attributes they thought were present in these various kinds of soy sauce. And we came up with a group of about 60 terms. Each group came up with about the same number of terms. Some were very much the same and some were a little different. And so we had a term in Thailand, and they said it smelled like roaches. So an insect. As in
cockroaches?
Cockroaches, yes.
Right.
So it smelled,
put me off.
it smelled like cockroaches. And in the U.S., we had no idea what they were talking about. And so, but there were terms that we had used that they hadn't used. And so we got them together. We could have done it partly by video, but in fact, we took several panelists to Thailand with us. Our panel went to Thailand to work with them. And the panel said, what do you mean by cockroaches? And they said, well, if you smell in a kitchen or you smell in a laboratory, you smell in a room where cockroaches have been, you kind of get this smell of what they smell like. And so they said, give us an example, because we don't have that. We spray for bugs everywhere in the U.S. So they said, okay, there's a room here in our laboratories where sometimes we have cockroaches. So we'll go and smell that. And so they literally got down on the floor and smelled in the corner where the and they go, oh, we know what that is. We've called that this. So it was the same concept,
but with different words.
But with different words.
Do you remember how did the U.S. panelists call it?
It was a sort of like a dirty, fecal, sort of bathroom kind of odor.
Right. Okay.
And they went, oh, that's exactly. It's because it was the feces of the insects that they were smelling in the corner. It was that same sort of chemical bathroom dirty odor. Oh, we called it this. Oh, we called it this. So now we know it's the same thing, just a different word. So even though, and that's very important for us to know, because as we are trying to develop attributes that can be evaluated around the world, because soy sauce is soy sauce. It's the same. You know, you should have lots of options, and the options, it's not going to change because it's in Poland or if it's in the US, or it's still going to be produced like they would produce it. And so we might choose a different one in the US, or you might choose a different one in Poland, but still we want to be able to describe them. So we want to be able to do that in Japan. We want to be able to do it in Thailand. We want to be able to do it in the US. And in fact, as we look back over the publications that have come out since our data was collected, we see that a group in Japan has come up with, again, very similar words for soy sauce. That's good, because that means we're very consistent. We've got these panels trained to be very consistent and very good. Now, again, whether they like the soy sauce, my preferences for soy sauce may be quite different than, and I can tell you, we do a lot of work in both Thailand and Korea. Soy sauce is different in those two countries. They prefer different types of soy sauce. And in Korea, they have 4 different types, at least. One is for making soup. One is for putting with rice. One is for putting on meat. One is for putting in a marinade for other foods. They're not the same. They have more sugar or less sugar. We don't have that in the U.S. We have one type of soy sauce.
I think here I've seen at least 3 types in the shops.
Yeah. I mean, we have multiple types, but typically people use one kind. So anyway.
That's really extremely interesting. And in fact, this kind of leads me to the next question, because as I mentioned in the introduction, the center you are heading is recognized worldwide. And I imagine you get a lot of requests from around the world to carry out the analysis. So can you tell us maybe a little bit about some of the more unusual foods that you had the opportunity to analyze?
Well, we've done a few things that are, so obviously we've done, you name the kind of food and we've probably tested it. So we've tested snack foods, we've tested meats, we've tested bread, we've tested juices, milk products, dairy products, all kinds of products. And then there are some that you think, oh, I didn't know that. So we have done a lot of work on infant formula, for example. In the U.S., for a period of time, there was a huge outcry against using infant formula. We should only breastfeed. We should only do this. And the manufacturers of infant formula were saying, okay, that's fine, but not everyone can do that. Not everyone has the time, or even some women are dry and they just simply can't breastfeed. And so the question was, okay, what does human milk taste like, so that we can match as close as possible to the sweetness, to the various flavors, so that infants are not learning something completely different. They're not learning to just like sweet water, for example. Mm-hmm. So we actually did a huge study of breast milk to study what the flavor of breast milk was. You would never think to test breast milk, but that's quite an unusual thing. And then we compared various formulas for infants to that breast milk to make sure they were quite similar in nature. The same thing is true for foods for special populations, people who have special needs, who have trouble swallowing or may have difficulty with certain diseases that cause changes in what they can eat. So, for example, people who have phenylketonuria cannot, when they're young, children or infants, they don't have a very good digestive system for certain proteins. Right. And so those proteins have to be, they still need protein, but they can't digest it. So it has to be pre-digested, and they have to drink it in a drink. And it tastes terrible. It's just because some of the amino acids are quite strong, fermented, sulfur odors that are just.
That sounds really unpleasant.
It's very unpleasant.
Those people, I mean, because the condition, there is no choice. Yes,
there's no choice.
You've got to prepare a formula like that.
Yeah, but the goal is to make those formulas to see what we can mask those flavors with. So can we add something like vanilla, or can we add something and make it chocolate flavored so that it's not quite as bad as what it would normally be? Because it's so horrific. You don't want to eat this. And so people lose a lot of weight. They have trouble because they don't want to eat that. So we have to develop ways, not with chocolate, for example, but we have to develop things that can be covering up that bad flavor, to mask that bad flavor.
That's really interesting. But I guess maybe that is what we were talking about it just before we got to the studio, that those kind of products that, let's say, emulate meat,
yes,
can sometimes be a bit like that. That yes. you get like some kind of plant-based sausage, and then the taste is kind of really strange.
Yes. And so you have to change the flavor of those. So you're starting with soy, or you're starting with whatever the product is that you're going to work with for these plant-based meat analogs. And so you've got to add flavors to them, because obviously they don't have a natural meat flavor to them. They don't have natural juices like meat do, perhaps. So you've got to add things that give it a flavor, that give it a texture. They have to be processed to produce the right texture. And that's very important. We're looking at, you ask about unusual foods. So we've done a lot of a fair bit of work on insect powder, for example.
I was going to ask you about that, because that's like a big thing at the moment. I don't know if you both agree with me, but somehow, this is also these foods have found their way into the mainstream. Mm-hmm. I guess purely because the recent legislation by European Union that finally we can sell these products here in Europe. Mm-hmm. But to be honest, I'm not sure if someone tells me, would you like to try it? I don't know what my answer will be,
Probably when you will try a product, but without knowledge that there is some fluor from insects, it will be acceptable without anything, because there is no specific taste, etc. So we can mask it with many other ingredients. However, when you will see just information, okay, it is with insects, so sometimes in your mind it's just a barrier against, okay, I don't accept. Exactly. But if you don't know, then everything is okay.
And do some of the colleagues, in your department at the university, do they actually work with those maybe insect-based?
Yeah, we have one
foods?
team just working generally about insects, how we can use them. And the next steps will be, of course, about just the formulation of products. But now just to how to obtain and checking the quality, what is the quality of protein, etc., and all the other fractions. But they have also they are trying just to start the cooperation also with some industrial partners. So we will see maybe in the future as well, we will have some insects products with.
And there may be a
connection
panel.
Yes. And then of course the panel is obligatory.
They have to taste and they have to see, because we want to know how addition of insect, for example, changes the flavor of whatever it's been added to. And there are so many different kinds of insects that can be used, and people are more willing to eat some kinds of insects than other kinds of insects. So, for example, if we ask people if they're interested if they would be willing to eat crickets, there's a different, or cricket powder, protein powder made from crickets, there's a different acceptance of that than there is if you ask them about fly larvae or worms. That's not, that's not as, they're not as likely to eat that.
Yeah, I can imagine. But would you say, are we maybe us in Europe, because traditionally we've never had insect-based foods, are we a little bit more prejudiced against those things than maybe people in Asia? I seem to remember watching, some programs where they would force celebrities to eat those kind of strange things. And
so we've looked at 13 countries around the world, and there are several that are much more willing to eat than others, but it's not necessarily continent-based.
Right.
The two countries that stand out very quickly for me are Thailand and Mexico. Both of those are quite willing to eat. Mexico, perhaps more than any country, we had we did a very large survey of people asking if they would be willing to try foods made with insects, powder, and other things. And more than almost 70% of people in Mexico said, well, yes, we would do that.
Oh, interesting.
In Thailand, the number is around 50%. In Japan, the number is quite low. That's not acceptable at all.
And Europe?
Europe is very similar to the U.S. in that respect. Maybe 20 to 30% of people were willing to try. Not a whole lot of difference in Europe. But, for example, in Asia, you mentioned, so are we different from Asians? Well, in Thailand, very accepting. In Japan, not accepting at all. In India, where many people are vegetarian, insects are not vegetarian, so we found the very lowest percentage of people willing to eat insect in India. That was the least. And yet, many people think of India as a country with lots of insects, and they're always around, and so you'd think they're familiar, but no, it's not, because it's a religious thing there. In Japan, it's quite cultural. In the U.S. and in Europe, I think it's more cultural. We don't typically do that.
Exactly. I mean, that's fascinating, really. And so maybe I would like to kind of talk now a little bit about this interdisciplinary nature of sensory science, because as you said, there are various factors that have to be included. And I guess they all contribute to acceptance of products. And so here I was thinking that the three pillars, let's say, are food science, marketing, and psychology here at play. And I guess you are, with those sensory analysis, you're actually very close to application.
Yes.
In a way, more so than maybe any other scientific fields. So my question would be, first, maybe, do you think the results of sensory analysis influence marketing strategies for companies?
I hope so.
Should.
They should.
They should.
Yes. If it's very important that the product and the marketing strategy match. We know that. When they don't match, you don't have success, because as I say, there are the sensory properties of the product and there's liking of the product. And in between that is this screen of expectation that consumers have. If you expect to get one thing because that's what's being marketed to you, but the sensory properties don't give you that, the product will fail. It doesn't matter how good it is. If you've marketed it wrong, it's not going to be successful. But if you start with, you can start at either end. I don't care. If you've got the market strategy, then the research and development team needs to figure out how they can meet that market strategy with a product. If research and development has a good product, the marketing people need to figure out how to market that product appropriately so that it will meet. But it's absolutely part of that. So you've got the psychological aspects. You have the physiological aspects. So we're very involved in behavior, physiology, chemistry, because that's what makes products. Products are made up of chemicals, and when we put them in our mouth, it's a biological, physiological process. So we're very interested in that. Of course, the psychology is essential, and the business aspects of all of that. So we're trying to sort of merge all of these things together into what ultimately becomes a product that you want to buy, that you want to purchase, so that companies are willing to make that for you. I'm always telling people, companies are in the business to make products that make money, so that's their job. And we, as consumers, want products that are going to always be there when we want them, at a price we can afford, that are delicious and provide whatever it is we want at the moment, nutrition or health or convenience or all these other things. And so there's this symbiotic relationship between consumers and industry. There should be. We shouldn't be at odds with each other. Oh, you're producing that, but that's wrong. No, we should be working together to make sure that we're producing what I want to eat, what you want to eat, what Agnieszka, what everyone wants to eat. And it's not all the same. So we have different wants and different needs. We can eat different things, but only if companies are creating those products for us.
That is true. But I think, surely I hear from all kinds of all researchers that I speak to and my colleagues in the technology transfer team that there seem to be always some kind of challenges when you when you work with with industry. So what can we try and maybe summarize a little bit? What are the typical challenges that you come across when businesses try to implement some of your ideas into practice?
Oh, there are many challenges, but usually when even there are very good ideas, so the industry is asking, okay, is this component available? On what is the price? Mm-hmm. How can I implement it into the technology? Because if it's very complicated, so then, of course, it will be expensive product. So for them, it's not so much interested. So we have to find some solutions just
to cut the price a little bit.
Because
can be made
quite
cheaper.
Often when we had a meeting, so they said, okay, that's great. That's super. That's really the nutrition value is very high, but we are not able to implement it in our production. So please show us the solution which will suit what we look like. So that's sometimes a problem. Of course, we have also some successful stories. So it was possible just to combine both sides, the industrial and academic, and we should work just to find the solution which will be suitable for both sides.
And I guess you, Professor, you have really a lot of experience working with companies. Yes. I remember reading something in your biography.
Lots of companies.
You actually worked outside of the academia for a while.
Yes.
So then again, can you tell us a little bit about the challenges that you have come across in your...
I think that, universities are designed to advance the world. We are educating the world. We're trying to create the science that advances the world. Business is trying to create products or whatever that consumers want. Those two things are not always compatible, yes. But they can be. And one of the things that we as academics have to understand is this business idea that we have to be able to get a supply of ingredients. So you may have created a new ingredient, but if we can't get a supply of it that's going to be consistent, it's not useful to us. If we can't get the supply, if we can't get it for a cost that makes it affordable, it's not of interest to us. It's one of the products with insect powder, for example. Insect powder is readily available. Not all of it is very good. Some brands are better than others. Some suppliers are better than others, but it's very expensive. So it's a very expensive protein right now because the manufacturers are all small. because there's not a market. So do we raise the manufacturing to create the market, or does the market go and say, it's does the chicken or the egg come first?
It's exactly that kind of question.
So we have to think like a business person when we are working with industry, and they have to think like us a little bit. So we have to come to a merging of the minds, if you will. I think it's very possible to do, but we have to understand there are cost constraints, there are availability constraints, there are I'll come back to the insect again, because we did this project was partly with industry. And one of the questions that we had for consumers was, if a large manufacturer that you bought products from regularly decided that they were going to put insect powder in a new product, would you still buy other products from that brand, or would you stop buying products from that brand? And the answer was they would stop buying products from that brand because they wouldn't trust that the brand wouldn't also contaminate those other products with insect powder. So if you were a chocolate manufacturer like Vavel, or you were a Mondelez making snack foods, and you suddenly came out with a similar product, but it had insect powder in it, people would kind of look at all of your products and go, "Oh, no, I don't think so." As an academic, you're saying, "Oh, but we need to add insect powder to this. It's more protein, it's healthier, it's cheaper, it's better for the environment." And the business person is saying, "But consumers might want that product. Some consumers may be willing to eat it, but it's going to scare a lot of consumers away." So from that standpoint of view, they have to create a new brand. They have to start a new brand label that people know as the insect brand, not Lay's potato chips or Vavel chocolate or whatever, because that wouldn't be a good thing. So we have to understand that they can't just implement something without thinking, how is this going to affect our other business? And how is this going to affect consumers' perception of not only this product, but the other products that we make?
That's a very interesting point you raised here, but I was just thinking about all these funders that we talked about again before. I think I saw, for example, with the Horizon Europe calls, some calls asking academics and business to come together to work, for example, on those insect-based products. As a way to go forward with maybe, I don't know, addressing some kind of global issues such as food security and so on, or cutting maybe dependence on long food chains. So do you think that this is the right direction, that this funding is actually needed and can be very helpful in bringing those changes, maybe, making those waiting times a little bit shorter?
I think one of the challenges that industry has is that when industry funds a project, they want to protect their investment. They want to protect their intellectual property. So they don't. If you're working with industry, there may be limitations on what you can publish, for example. There may be limitations on what you can say outside. That's where having government projects is wonderful, because then that's public. The industry can contribute what they're willing to contribute, intellectually wise. The academics contribute what they contribute, and you learn something about each other, and you learn something about what's new and what's happening. And at the end, there's also property, intellectual property, that's now available to almost anyone. So that's a wonderful thing, I think. We don't have that so much in the U.S. We need more of that. We've been requesting more government grants that are symbiotic between industry and the academic world.
So I guess we're quite lucky in Europe in that aspect. And let me just maybe try and wrap up this session today. And then we'll come back a little bit to this seasoned project, because I remember, here at the university, we try to support like the best ideas. And I remember hearing about something like Seasoned quite a few years ago. And then you were lucky the second time, which is actually amazing because we all know that how hard it is to get funding from Horizon Europe. Do you think, Professor, that this project can really help, first of all, with raising awareness of sensory science? That's one aspect. And also maybe attract, bigger interest here in Poland from companies and also from maybe students who would then in turn be more interested in studying, food science.
I do hope so, and I believe in that because that's very important. And I think that here we have just a big market for cooperation with the industry. Maybe not the biggers, because sometimes they have their own panels, they have their own R&D, and they just independent, we can say. But we have a lot of medium-sized, small companies which need this help and they are not able to do it by themselves. So we would like just to focus on this market and just to make strong cooperation with them. And I do hope that when we will develop in this direction much more, so then of course our students will be much more focusing also on sensory science, not only on just the technology, physical properties, chemical properties, but much more on sensory properties, because they are, of course, focusing, but maybe in the future much more. That's what we would like just to obtain.
So we want to popularize that a little bit more, maybe with the project. And since we are talking about Seasoned, I know that you, Edgar, you play a special role in this project. You are part of the so-called advisory board. Could we actually say a little bit about what exactly it involves?
Well, I think the project is really about increasing the knowledge base and the ability of the university to really train and help people who are going out into industry, to the academic world, to wherever. That's what universities are good at. And as we've been talking about, sensory is really a key aspect of whether products, understanding those sensory properties is key to whether products succeed. So if you want to be in industry and you want to develop new products, you'd better know something about your consumers and what they want and the sensory aspects that are there. Universities are the places that teach that. So in this case, there is a wonderful consortium of groups in Spain, here in Poland, in Denmark, that are working together to increase the knowledge base here. And then there are several of us who are working as advisory board members to make sure that everything is sort of moving along in the direction that we would expect. And the way in which sensory is done in Europe and in the U.S. is a little bit different, and so I think it's important that they have sort of views from around the world, because everybody operates a little bit differently. As you talked about, you have many small and medium-sized companies, and we do in the U.S. too, but many companies we work for are very large companies. They're worldwide companies. And they just have so much work to do, they can't do it all.
And that's where you come into play.
So we help them when they need help. The small companies, we may be actually running the studies for them. The larger companies, we're running a project because they don't have time to do it. So they've contracted that out. And we do things a little bit differently. So I think, it's important that there is this advisory group who's saying, okay, this is one way to do it. Here's another way to do it. Here's another way to do it. Let's find the best option for Poland. Let's find the best option for this situation.
And I guess we're hoping, yes, that the dream here, the aim is to become like, have a central role in this part of Europe for sensory science. Mm-hmm. So are there maybe some activities planned as part of the project that you think are particularly, interesting? You mentioned that hackathon that is happening soon.
Yes.
So how does that work in terms of sensory science? Are you going to train people to do?
So there are a group of people who are are meeting in Bilbao, Spain next week at the Basque Culinary Institute. They're one of the partners for this project. And over the course of several days, there will be a couple of speakers, and we will have a couple of groups. I will be one of those speakers and be in charge of one group. I think one of the members from Norway is going to be in charge of another group. Anyway. And then, so what's going to happen is looking at new ways of thinking about how we can do the sensory sciences that make sense for the project that they're working on or the project that they may be involved in, and how we can think about that. What are the methods that they will use? What kinds of strategies will they use to make sure that that number one, the sensory is well implemented, but ultimately that the products are good, the products are successful. So
great. That sounds really interesting, and I hope you'll have a nice event next week.
Oh, I'm sure we will. Yes.
Thank you very much to the both of you for spending this, I don't know, an hour, I guess, something like an hour with us today. Thank you very much, and we hope to. We hope to be able to be with you again soon as part of this Mamy, zielone, pojęcie podcast by Wrocław University of Environmental and Life Sciences. Thank you very much for joining me today, and goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.